The first thing Colonel Marcus Webb noticed wasn't the smoking wreckage of the F-35 Lightning scattered across the Afghan mountainside, or the impossible spiral pattern burned into the earth where something had touched down. It wasn't even the complete radio silence from Bagram Air Base that had lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. What stopped him cold was the enemy camp below. 47 Taliban fighters with their weapons laid flat on the ground, kneeling in perfect formation, facing a figure who shouldn't have existed. She stood in the center of their circle, wearing civilian clothes torn from what looked like a week in the wilderness. No uniform, no radio equipment, no backup, just a woman with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled back in a makeshift ponytail, her left forearm exposed to reveal a tattoo that made Webb's breath catch in his throat. Even through his field glasses, he could make out the distinctive wings wrapped around a lightning bolt, the unofficial insignia of the 77th Fighter Squadron's most classified unit. The woman they called Ghost. "Sir," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez whispered, adjusting his scope, "are we looking at what I think we're looking at?" Webb had spent 15 years climbing the military hierarchy, had seen 3 wars and commanded 2 air wings, but he'd never seen anything like this. The Taliban fighters weren't just surrendering, they were showing reverence. One of them, a grizzled commander Webb recognized from intelligence photos, was actually bowing. "Get me a direct line to the Pentagon," Webb muttered, never lowering his binoculars. "Priority Alpha." The woman below seemed to sense his presence. She turned slowly, deliberately, until she was looking directly up at his position 300 meters away. Even at this distance, Webb felt the weight of her gaze. She raised her right hand, not in greeting, not in surrender, but in a simple acknowledgement between professionals. Then she did something that would haunt Webb's dreams for months to come. She smiled. Not the cocky grin of a pilot who just pulled off an impossible maneuver, not the relief of someone who cheated death. This was something else entirely. This was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The Taliban commander stood, his hands still visible and empty, and spoke a single word in perfect English. "Wraith." Webb felt his radio crackle to life for the first time in hours. Static cleared, and through the interference came a voice he thought he'd never hear again. A voice that had been officially declared killed in action 18 months ago during Operation Silent Thunder. "Control, this is Wraith. I'm coming home." The sky above them began to change color. Lieutenant Commander Zara Wraith Volkov had been dead for 537 days. The memorial service at Arlington had been closed casket, naturally. There hadn't been enough left of her F-22 Raptor after the missiles strike over the Hindu Kush to fill a coffee cup, let alone identify remains. The Air Force had buried an empty box and awarded her the Distinguished Flying Cross posthumously. Her squadron had moved on. Her replacement, a hotshot named Peterson, had taken over her call sign rotation. Her apartment in Virginia Beach had been cleaned out, her personal effects shipped to a sister in Oregon who spoke of her in past tense. The woman standing in that circle of surrendered enemies was supposed to be a memory, a ghost story told in pilot-ready rooms. But ghosts don't bleed, and Webb could see the dark stain spreading across her left shoulder. "Rodriguez, prep the medical kit," Webb ordered, his voice steadier than he felt. "Whatever's happening down there, she's hurt." Through his earpiece, he could hear the scrambled radio chatter as bases across the region suddenly burst back to life. Every frequency that had been dead for hours was now flooded with confused voices asking the same questions. What happened to our communications? Why did our systems just reset? And why was every radar screen in a 300-mile radius showing the impossible? A single aircraft signature moving at Mach 3.2 at ground level, passing through solid rock. Zara hadn't moved from her position, but the Taliban fighters were beginning to stand. Not to fight. Webb could see their weapons remained on the ground, but to listen. She was speaking to them in what sounded like flawless Pashto, her voice carrying across the mountain air with an authority that made seasoned warriors nod like schoolchildren. "Sir," Rodriguez's voice carried a tremor Webb had never heard from the veteran NCO. "The thermal imaging. It's not reading her body temperature as human." Webb adjusted his own thermal scope and felt his world tilt. Where Zara stood, the thermal signature showed something impossible. Her core temperature was reading at exactly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, but her extremities were showing zero thermal output. She was simultaneously blazing hot and completely cold, as if her body existed in two different states at once. "Get me an emergency extraction team," Webb said quietly, "and call General Morrison. Tell him Operation Silent Thunder isn't as over as we thought." The woman below raised her left arm again, and this time Webb got a clear view of the tattoo. It wasn't just the 77th Fighter Squadron insignia. Wrapped around the lightning bolt and wings was something else: coordinates, numbers that had been burned into her skin with surgical precision. Coordinates that matched exactly with their current position. She had been waiting here for them. The extraction helicopter's rotors cut through the thin mountain air like thunder, but Zara never looked up. She finished her conversation with the Taliban commander, who saluted her, actually saluted, before walking away with his men. No weapons retrieved, no backward glances. They simply melted into the mountainside as if they had never been there at all. Webb and his team descended on fast ropes, weapons ready but somehow knowing they wouldn't be needed. Zara waited until they hit the ground before turning to face them. Up close, Webb could see the changes 18 months had wrought. Her face was leaner, marked by exposure and something else, a kind of knowledge that sat behind her eyes like a weight. "Colonel Webb," she said, and her voice was exactly as he remembered. Calm, professional, touched with the faintest hint of a Russian accent that she'd never quite managed to eliminate despite 15 years in America. "Thank you for the pickup." "Zara," the name came out like a prayer. "What the hell happened to you?" She looked down at her torn clothing, at the blood seeping through her makeshift bandages, at her bare feet that should have been shredded by the rocky terrain but showed only old scars. "That's complicated." Rodriguez was running medical scans with a handheld device, frowning at the readings. "Ma'am, I'm showing some unusual vital signs. We should get you to a field hospital." "I'm fine, Sergeant." Zara's tone carried an authority that made Rodriguez step back instinctively. "The bleeding stopped hours ago. It always does." Webb caught that detail, always, but filed it away for later. "Wraith, your aircraft was confirmed destroyed over the Khyber Pass. Satellite imagery showed complete disintegration. How did you survive?" For the first time since they'd found her, Zara's composure cracked slightly. She looked up at the sky, where clouds were gathering in patterns that seemed too precise to be natural. "I didn't." The words hung in the mountain air like smoke. Rodriguez stopped pretending to check his equipment. Webb felt his hand drift unconsciously toward his sidearm, not from threat but from a deeper, more primitive instinct. "Explain that," Webb said carefully. Zara rolled up her left sleeve completely, revealing the full extent of the tattoo. The coordinates were just the beginning. Wrapped around her entire forearm was a detailed schematic, not of an aircraft but of something else. Something that looked organic and mechanical at the same time. 18 months ago I died," she said simply. "What came back? That's the complicated part." The helicopter behind them suddenly powered down without anyone touching the controls. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had seen combat in 4 different countries, had witnessed 2 nuclear weapon demonstrations, and had once watched an experimental aircraft break the sound barrier at ground level. None of it had prepared him for the woman standing before them, calmly explaining her own death while reality seemed to bend around her presence. "Ma'am," Rodriguez ventured, his instrument readings growing more erratic by the minute, "when you say you died." "I mean my heart stopped beating for 17 minutes and 36 seconds, Zara replied with clinical precision. Core body temperature dropped to ambient. Brain activity ceased. By every medical and legal definition, Lieutenant Commander Zara Volkov died on October 15th at 13:47 hours local time. Webb's training fought against what he was hearing. The crash investigation found no survivors. The missile impact vaporized my aircraft, yes. The explosion should have killed me instantly. Zara's fingers traced the tattoo on her arm almost unconsciously. But something else happened first, something that changed the fundamental nature of what I am. She looked directly at Webb, and he saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. Not madness. He'd seen enough broken pilots to recognize that particular form of damage. This was something else. This was someone who had seen beyond the edge of the world and found herself forever changed by the experience. The last thing I remember as a normal human being was pulling the ejection handle, she continued. The next thing I knew, I was standing in a place that doesn't exist on any map, surrounded by technology that shouldn't be possible, speaking with entities that, she paused, searching for words, that had been waiting for someone like me for a very long time. Rodriguez's handheld scanner began emitting a low beeping sound. He glanced at the display and went pale. Colonel, I'm reading some kind of energy signature. It's not radioactive, not electromagnetic. It's something else entirely. The changes aren't immediately visible, Zara explained, noticing their growing unease. But they're there. Enhanced reflexes, perfect night vision, the ability to interface directly with electronic systems, and the dreams. She trailed off, looking troubled for the first time. What dreams? Webb asked. I see things that haven't happened yet. Battles, aircraft designs, technologies that won't be invented for decades. Sometimes I see the same event from multiple perspectives simultaneously, as if time isn't as linear as we've always assumed. The wind around them died completely, leaving an unnatural stillness that made every sound seem amplified. In the distance, they could hear the rhythmic thump of another helicopter approaching, the extraction team Webb had called for. That's our ride, Webb said, but he made no move toward the landing zone. Zara smiled, that same haunting smile Webb had seen through his binoculars. Colonel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Go ahead. In your official report about this encounter, what are you going to write? The question caught him off guard. Webb realized he had been so focused on the impossibility of finding her alive that he hadn't considered how to explain any of this to his superiors. How do you report that a dead pilot has been found consorting with enemy combatants who treated her like a deity? How do you document thermal readings that violate the laws of physics? I don't know, he admitted. Then let me make it easier for you, Zara said, and began walking toward the extraction point. Write that you found a survivor. Write that she was injured but mobile. Write that the enemy had already withdrawn by the time you arrived. And the rest of it. She turned back, and in that moment Webb saw not the mysterious figure who had been presumed dead, but the pilot he had known before, professional, dedicated, and carrying the weight of secrets that were hers alone to bear. Some truths aren't meant for official reports, Colonel. Some truths are meant for the people who can handle them when the time comes. The extraction helicopter settled onto the makeshift landing zone, its rotors kicking up a dust cloud that obscured everything for several crucial seconds. When the air cleared, Zara was already aboard, strapped in and wearing a flight helmet that someone had apparently given her, though Webb was certain none of his team had been carrying spare equipment. As they lifted off, Webb found himself staring down at the spot where they had found her. The circle where the Taliban fighters had knelt was clearly visible, but there was something else. A pattern burned into the earth that he hadn't noticed before. From the air, it looked almost like a landing pad, as if something large had touched down with perfect precision. Something that had delivered one dead pilot back to the world of the living. Over the intercom, Zara's voice was steady and professional. "Control, this is Wraith, inbound to base with extraction team. Request immediate medical evaluation and intelligence debriefing." "Copy that, Wraith," came the response from Bagram. "Welcome back to the land of the living." Through his headset, Webb heard Zara's quiet laugh, a sound that carried no humor at all. "Copy, Control, land of the living." But as Webb watched her profile against the cockpit window, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the reflection of the glass, he could see her face clearly. But in the reflection behind that, the secondary reflection that should have shown the same image, there was nothing at all. Zara Volkov cast only one reflection, as if half of her existed in a place that mirrors couldn't reach. The debriefing room at Bagram Air Base had been hastily cleared and sanitized, its walls now lined with recording equipment and monitoring devices that hummed with quiet efficiency. General Morrison sat across from Zara, his weathered face a mask of professional composure that didn't quite hide his bewilderment. Beside him, Dr. Sarah Chen from the Air Force Medical Research Command studied her tablet with growing confusion. "Let's start with the basics," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in command. "State your name, rank, and serial number for the record." "Lieutenant Commander Zara Volkov, service number 2847 Delta Kilo 9, she replied without hesitation. "Though I should note that according to your files, that person died 18 months ago." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Yes, let's talk about that. Your aircraft was positively identified as destroyed. Debris analysis confirmed complete structural failure. Satellite thermal imaging showed no survivors." "All of that is accurate," Zara agreed. "My F-22 was destroyed. I was killed in the explosion. But death, as it turns out, isn't always permanent." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. "The medical examination showed several anomalies. Your bone density is 40% higher than normal human levels. Your reflexes test at superhuman speeds. And your blood work," she paused, consulting her tablet. "Your blood work shows cellular structures I've never seen before." "I'm aware of the changes," Zara said calmly. "They were necessary adaptations." "Adaptations to what?" Morrison demanded. For the first time since entering the room, Zara hesitated. She looked up at the ceiling-mounted cameras, then at the recording equipment, finally settling her gaze on the general. "Sir, with respect, that information is classified at a level that doesn't exist in our current system." "Explain that." "What happened to me involves technologies and entities that represent a clear and present danger to global security. The information I carry could destabilize governments and panic populations if released prematurely." Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with the calculating gaze of a man who had navigated military politics for 3 decades. "You're asking me to trust a dead woman who's been MIA for over a year." "I'm asking you to trust a pilot who has never lied to you, sir. Not when I was Lieutenant Volkov fresh out of flight school, not when I was leading classified missions over North Korea, and not now." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of electronics. Dr. Chen broke the tension. "The tattoo on your arm, we've identified the coordinates. They match the location where Colonel Webb found you, but the other elements of the design are a map," Zara finished. "A schematic for technology that exists in the spaces between what we consider possible and what we consider science fiction." "Whose technology?" Morrison asked quietly. Zara's expression became distant, as if she were looking through the walls of the debriefing room to something far beyond. "They don't have a name we could pronounce. They've been watching us for longer than our species has existed, waiting for us to develop enough to be useful." "Useful for what?" "For the war that's coming." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of implication that made both Morrison and Dr. Chen shift uncomfortably. Outside, they could hear the routine sounds of military life continuing: aircraft engines, radio chatter, the distant bark of drill instructors. Normal sounds from a normal world that suddenly felt very fragile. "What war?" Morrison's voice was barely above a whisper. Zara stood and walked to the single window in the room, looking out at the airfield where F-35s and support aircraft sat in neat rows. The war for Earth's survival. The war that will determine whether humanity gets to continue existing as an independent species, or whether we become something else entirely. She turned back to face them, and in her eyes Morrison could see the weight of knowledge that no human should have to carry. "And we have approximately 18 months to prepare." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Chen was the first to find her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Zara, what you're describing sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie, I know." Zara returned to her seat, but there was a new tension in her posture, as if she were preparing for combat. 18 months ago, I would have said the same thing, but then I died and I learned that our understanding of reality is incomplete. Morrison activated a recording device with deliberate precision. "For the record, Lieutenant Commander Volkov, are you claiming that Earth is under threat from extraterrestrial forces?" "I'm claiming that Earth has always been under threat from extraterrestrial forces. The difference is that now they've decided the threat level we represent has crossed a critical threshold." "What threshold?" Dr. Chen asked, her scientific training warring with growing alarm. Zara's fingers traced the tattoo on her arm, and for a moment the ink seemed to shimmer with its own light. "Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, atmospheric manipulation, genetic engineering, we're developing technologies that put us on the edge of becoming a true spacefaring civilization. From their perspective, we're approaching graduation from a primitive species to a potential competitor." "And they don't want competition," Morrison said, understanding flooding his expression. "They want partners, willing partners if possible, subjugated partners if necessary." The general stood and began packing, his mind clearly racing through implications and possibilities. "The technology that changed you, it's from them. It's technology designed to create a bridge between their species and ours. A translator, you might say. Someone who can facilitate communication and cooperation." "Or collaboration," Dr. Chen said quietly. Zara met her gaze steadily. "Or resistance." Morrison stopped packing. "Are you telling me you've been recruited to fight a war against alien invaders?" "I'm telling you I've been given the tools to make a choice when the time comes. The same choice our entire species will have to make." She stood again, and this time there was something different about her movement, a fluid grace that seemed to defy normal human limitations. "But first, we need to survive what's coming, and for that, we need to start preparing now." "What exactly is coming?" Morrison demanded. Zara looked out the window again, and her voice took on a quality that made the hair on the back of Morrison's neck stand up. It was the tone of someone delivering a weather report about an approaching hurricane. "The first contact event is scheduled for 6 months from now. It won't be peaceful." The weight of those words settled over the room like a suffocating blanket, and for several long moments, none of them could speak. Finally, Morrison activated his secure communication device. "Get me the Joint Chiefs," he said quietly. "Priority Alpha, we need to talk." Outside the window, a formation of F-22 Raptors screamed across the sky in perfect formation, their pilots unaware that everything they thought they knew about their mission was about to change forever. And in the distance, barely visible against the afternoon sky, something that wasn't quite a cloud moved with purpose toward the horizon. 3 days after the debriefing, Zara found herself in the most secure facility the United States military had to offer. A bunker complex buried 200 feet beneath the Colorado mountains, where the air tasted of recycled atmosphere, and the walls hummed with electromagnetic shielding designed to block every known form of surveillance. She wasn't alone. Around the conference table sat the most powerful military minds in the country: General Morrison, Admiral Rebecca Torres from Naval Intelligence, General James Hartwell from Space Command, and Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Secretary of Defense's Chief Science Advisor. At the head of the table, Secretary of Defense Michael Stone reviewed a classified brief that had turned his normally composed expression into something approaching panic. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Stone said, his voice carefully controlled. "You're telling us that an extraterrestrial intelligence has been observing Earth for thousands of years, that they've now decided we represent a potential threat, and that they're planning some form of first contact within the next 6 months." "That's correct, sir," Zara replied. "And your source for this information is, what exactly? Visions, dreams, alien mind meld?" Admiral Torres leaned forward. "With respect, sir, Lieutenant Commander Volkov's claims align with several unexplained incidents we've been tracking. The electromagnetic anomalies over the Pacific, the unidentified objects detected by our deep space monitoring stations, the sudden advancement in certain enemy technologies." "You're suggesting these incidents are connected?" Stone asked. "I'm suggesting they're tests," Zara interjected. "Probes to assess our current technological capabilities and military readiness. They've been gradually escalating the complexity of their interactions to gauge our responses." General Hartwell, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "The Space Command has detected 17 objects in the past 6 months that don't match any known aerospace technology. Objects that appear and disappear from our tracking systems without explanation." "Scout ships," Zara said with certainty that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "They're mapping our defensive installations, our communication networks, our critical infrastructure." Dr. Vasquez consulted her tablet. "The technology you claim to have integrated with, can you demonstrate it?" Zara looked around the room, her gaze settling on the sophisticated computer system built into the conference table. Without moving from her chair, without touching any controls, the large display screen activated and began cycling through classified satellite imagery. "How are you doing that?" Stone demanded. "Direct neural interface with electronic systems," Zara explained, as the screen continued to respond to her unspoken commands. "It's one of the more basic modifications they made." The screen went dark, then displayed a single image that made everyone lean forward. A photograph taken from high Earth orbit, showing what appeared to be a massive structure partially hidden behind the far side of the moon. "When was this taken?" Admiral Torres asked. 17 hours ago, Zara replied. "Your satellites captured it during a routine lunar observation pass. They haven't processed the data yet. It won't appear in the regular intelligence briefings for another 48 hours. Stone's complexion had gone pale. "That structure, how large is it?" "Approximately 4 kilometers in diameter. It's been there for 6 weeks, but they've been using selective electromagnetic shielding to hide it from your detection systems. They wanted you to find it when they were ready for you to find it." "Ready for what purpose?" General Morrison asked. Zara's expression became grim. "To deliver an ultimatum." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the bunker's life support systems. Outside, 200 feet above them, normal life continued. People went to work, children attended school, families planned weekend activities, all of them unaware that their world was about to change forever. "What kind of ultimatum?" Stone asked quietly. "Join them willingly or be conquered militarily. They'll present it as a choice, but the terms will be non-negotiable." Admiral Torres leaned back in her chair. "And if we refuse?" "Then we fight a war we can't win using weapons that are centuries behind theirs." The implications of that statement settled over the room like a death sentence. These were people who had dedicated their lives to defending their country, who had faced down every conceivable threat from human enemies. But this was something beyond their experience, beyond their training, beyond their understanding of what was possible. Unless, Zara continued, and for the first time since entering the room there was something like hope in her voice. Unless what? Stone demanded. Zara stood and walked to the display screen, which was now showing detailed schematics of aircraft designs that looked like nothing in any human arsenal. Unless we're not fighting alone. In the deepest levels of the Colorado bunker, in a laboratory that officially didn't exist, Dr. Elena Vasquez watched Zara interface directly with the most advanced computer system the military had ever built. No keyboards, no voice commands, no physical contact of any kind. Just a woman standing 3 feet from a quantum processor and somehow accessing information that should have required security clearances she didn't possess. "Show me the propulsion system again," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice tight with fascination and fear. The holographic display that materialized above the table showed a 3-dimensional schematic of an aircraft engine unlike anything in human technology. Instead of traditional combustion or jet propulsion, the design seemed to manipulate spacetime itself, creating localized gravitational fields that could push or pull the aircraft through 3-dimensional space. "The mathematics are beyond our current understanding," Zara explained, her eyes never leaving the display. "But the basic principle is simple. Instead of pushing against air or exhaust, you push against the fabric of reality itself." "That's impossible," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "So was heavier-than-air flight once. So was nuclear fission. So was quantum entanglement." Zara gestured, and the display zoomed in on a component that looked like a crystalline matrix surrounded by electromagnetic field generators. "They've had millions of years to develop this technology. To them, it's as basic as internal combustion is to us." Secretary Stone, who had been observing from across the room, stepped closer. "Can we build it?" "Not with current materials science," Zara admitted. "But we can build something based on similar principles, something that would give us at least a fighting chance." The hologram shifted, showing a different design, still clearly alien in origin, but somehow more familiar, as if it had been adapted for human understanding and manufacturing capabilities. "This is what they showed me," Zara said quietly. "A hybrid design that combines their technology with ours. It won't match their capabilities, but it will be centuries ahead of anything we have now." General Morrison, who had been studying the schematics with the eye of someone who had spent decades working with military aircraft, looked up sharply. "The manufacturing requirements for something like this. We're talking about a complete revolution in materials science, electronics, propulsion theory." "And we have 6 months to do it," Stone said grimly. "Actually," Zara corrected, "we have less than that. The manufacturing timeline alone will require at least 4 months, assuming we can solve the materials problems immediately, which means we need to begin production on technologies we don't yet understand, using materials we haven't yet invented." Dr. Vasquez was taking notes on a secured tablet, her scientific training warring with the impossibility of what she was seeing. "The power requirements for this propulsion system, where does the energy come from?" The hologram shifted again, showing what appeared to be a small sphere surrounded by complex machinery. "Zero-point energy extraction," Zara explained. "It taps directly into the quantum vacuum, drawing power from the fundamental energy that exists in what we think of as empty space." "That's," Dr. Vasquez stopped, realizing she was about to say impossible again. "That's theoretical physics that we haven't even begun to explore." It was theoretical for them once too. The difference is that they had the luxury of millions of years to develop the theory gradually, to test it safely, to perfect it through trial and error. Stone was staring at the display with growing comprehension. You're talking about rebuilding our entire understanding of physics in a matter of months. I'm talking about survival, Zara replied simply. The choice isn't between gradual development and revolutionary advancement. The choice is between rapid advancement and extinction. She gestured again, and the hologram disappeared, leaving them in the sterile fluorescent lighting of the laboratory. In the sudden absence of the alien technology's glow, the room felt smaller, more confined, more human. "There's something else," Zara said, and her tone made everyone in the room focus completely on her words. "The technology they're offering, it comes with a price." "What kind of price?" Morrison asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer wouldn't be pleasant. "Integration. The human operators of these systems will need to be modified the same way I was modified. Neural interfaces, enhanced reflexes, altered brain chemistry. They'll be more than human, but they'll also be something else." The implications of that statement hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Vasquez was the first to speak. "How many operators would we need?" "For a viable defense force, at least 50 pilots plus ground crew, technicians, support staff. We're looking at several hundred people who would need to volunteer for permanent alteration." Stone was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone making decisions that would affect the fate of civilization. "Start making a list." Outside the bunker, the sun was setting over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that would have been beautiful under any other circumstances. But inside the laboratory, surrounded by the promise of impossible technology and the certainty of approaching war, beauty felt like a luxury they could no longer afford. The war for Earth's future was about to begin, and humanity's best hope might be to become something other than human. Time was running out. The first volunteer was Captain Maria Santos, a test pilot from Edwards Air Force Base who had logged more hours in experimental aircraft than anyone currently in service. She sat across from Zara in a small conference room at the Colorado facility, her personnel file spread between them like a roadmap of an exemplary military career. "I've read your service record," Zara said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Top 1% of your class at the Air Force Academy, distinguished service in 3 combat zones, lead test pilot on the F-35 program. Why are you volunteering for this?" Santos leaned back in her chair, her dark eyes steady and unafraid. "Because someone has to. Because if what you're telling us is true, then everything I've trained for, everything I've dedicated my life to defending, is about to be wiped out." "The process isn't reversible," Zara warned. "Once the modifications are made, you won't be entirely human anymore. The neural interfaces will alter your brain chemistry permanently. The physical enhancements will change your cellular structure. There's no going back." "Will I still be me?" It was a simple question with a complex answer. Zara was quiet for a moment, considering her response. "I remember everything about who I was before. My childhood, my training, my values, my relationships. But I also have access to knowledge and capabilities that no human was meant to possess. It's like, imagine you've been seeing the world in black and white your entire life, and suddenly you can see color. You're still you, but your perception of reality is fundamentally different." Santos nodded slowly. "The other volunteers, how many are there?" 47 so far. Pilots, engineers, technicians, support staff. All volunteers, all carefully screened, all aware that they're signing up for something unprecedented in human history. "What's the success rate?" Zara's expression became guarded. "For the process itself, 100% so far. The technology is precise, the modifications are stable, but success is measured in more than just survival." "Meaning?" "Meaning that not everyone who undergoes the process can handle what they become. 3 of the volunteers from the first batch requested reassignment to conventional forces. They were physically and mentally intact, but they couldn't adapt to the enhanced capabilities and knowledge. Santos was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Through the conference room's small window, she could see other volunteers going through their own briefings, their own decision points. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to military service, now facing a choice that would redefine what service meant. The aircraft, Santos said finally, what are they like? For the first time since the conversation began, Zara smiled, a genuine expression of enthusiasm that transformed her face. Unlike anything you've ever flown, imagine an F-22 Raptor with the agility of a hummingbird, the speed of a rocket, and the intelligence of a supercomputer. The aircraft becomes an extension of your own body, your own mind. You don't fly it so much as become it. And the enemy, what are we up against? The smile faded. Technology that makes our most advanced weapons look like stone knives and bearskins. But they have weaknesses. They rely too heavily on automated systems. They don't understand human unpredictability. And they've never faced an enemy that was willing to sacrifice everything for principles they don't comprehend. Santos stood and walked to the window, looking out at the controlled chaos of the facility. How long before the first contact event? 4 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. And how long before we're ready? That depends on how quickly we can build the aircraft and complete the modifications on the volunteers. Zara joined her at the window. Captain, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Go ahead. If we succeed, if we manage to defend Earth against this invasion, the world that emerges afterward won't be the same world you grew up in. Humanity will know we're not alone in the universe. The technology we're developing will revolutionize everything from transportation to communication to energy production. The volunteers who survive this war will be the first generation of a new kind of human being.